Afternoon. My name is David Krum. I'm a computer scientist. I'm the director of the Mixed Reality Lab at the USC Institute for Creative Technologies, and my colleague Sin-Hwa will also be presenting. She's a communication scientist, and she studies human-computer interaction, among other things. We like to be jacks of all trades. In the Mixed Reality Lab, we like to study and develop immersive technologies like virtual reality, augmented reality, and everything in between. And a lot of the applications we like to look at are training, improving communication, and improving collaboration. And our little claim to fame at the lab is we kind of help create the modern ecosystem of VR that you see today with our research into low-cost VR displays. The guy who started Oculus came out of our lab and kind of took that research and put it into practice. So that was kind of an interesting time. Okay. The question kind of on the table for today is, can virtual reality help us study human building interaction? And my answer to that is, I think so, yes. In my estimation, VR is a really interesting tool for studying environmental psychology and human building interaction in particular. And the special factor that VR brings to the table is that it enables humans to process that computer media as synthetic experiences, and synthetic environments, and as embodied experiences. So we can get, so in essence, it feels like a place, and it's a place that you can experience with your whole body. And that's a little different than looking at a picture. And this is, due to this notion of sensory motor contingencies. So a lot of people talk about VR as replacing the senses. I'll generate some sensory signal, and users will experience that, replace the real world senses. It's not exactly that. It's really that you're updating those signals appropriately as users take action in that space. So as you move around, the view of the environment changes. And that really makes a big difference. And I have a nice example that I like to share sometimes about just the power of head tracking. And of course there are a bunch of other sensory motor contingencies. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I'm a big Doctor Who fan, so this is a British science fiction series that has been on forever. And there's a great scene, and from this perspective, we're basically just looking at an oil painting. An oil painting is an image that you look at, and it's interesting, but they did a little special effect here where they do camera tracking, which is very analogous to the head tracking, and it turns out oil painting from an image into a gateway into another world. So I have a little video.
Arcadia, I've got it for a second city.
How is it doing that? How is that possible? It's an oil painting. In 3D.
Time Lord art. Bigger on the inside as well.
So, as you move the camera around, everything pops and becomes a place. And that's really interesting. And we've, in our lab, we've done research on things like redirected walking, where we do things with that presentation of space, these synthetic environments, and these coherent worlds. And we've actually done crazy things that, kind of push the edge of what's coherent and not coherent. So we have, a lot of researchers do this in VR, but basically warping and bending space around you so that you think you're walking in a straight line, but you're actually walking in circles. And there's a bunch of different approaches to do that. But this enables you to walk through basically an infinite world, even though your tracking space is of a finite and limited size. So VR is really cool for things like that, but I have to point out there are a bunch of limitations to VR. Of course, resolution is a problem. It's probably going to be a problem for a while. They always tell you in the specs, about the display and how many pixels they have available. But you have to think about angular resolution and how far apart or how widely they spread those pixels. And that matters because you may not be able to read text. So signs in the building, information displays in your simulated building, you may not be able to read. And you may not be able to read facial expressions on the other people that you're interacting with in that virtual world. And studies have also shown, things about field of view. If you have a smaller field of view, you're less likely to understand the structure of the environment as you walk through it. And also, there's this really interesting side effect of that people underestimate the distance to objects in VR, and that seems to be connected to that lower field of view. If we use a wider field of view display, like that red display that gives you a 150-degree field of view, we're a little bit closer to that veridical one-to-one judgment that you would hope to have in the real world. So rooms might seem much smaller than they really should be. VR also doesn't really do much about temperature. There are some limited experiments where they have fans and sun lamps and things like that. But there's some, VR modulates our temperature and comfort sensations. And my colleague Sin-Hwa is going to talk a little bit about that in a little bit. And of course, there are a bunch of other issues that I don't have time to talk about, but I'd love to talk about it in questions or afterwards. The dynamic range of display is, of course, nothing like the real world. There are some limitations with haptics. Things are expensive and clunky and not that high fidelity. And of course, there's simulator sickness, which is a whole other a problem that requires a lot of work to deal with. But in general, yeah, I think virtual reality gives us these embodied experiences in synthetic environments, so we can prototype and we can test and we can do some evaluation before we actually, put something into the real world. But there are fidelity limitations that we just have to plan in and put into our model. And so if you want to do an experiment, we really have to look at what are the cues and contexts that you need to provide to users, and what decisions and actions you want them to be able to take, and see if that matches up with what your technology, your VR, particular VR experience, VR system can provide. With that, I'm going to toss it over to Sin-Hwa.
So I've been doing work with Dave Krum, my boss, and with his full support. And I did one study, small study with architecture people. And Juno Choi was leading this one, so he should be here, but he's organizing other workshops somewhere else. So I'll do my best to deliver this one well. We'll see. And this one published in Building and Environment this year. So this one, we already know VR is into our everyday life, especially for fun, entertainment, and soon everything probably using VR, like training and learning and research and communication meetings, will be living this kind of age era. Then Dave Krum and me always, how can you make a immersion? People can get immersed in the virtual reality. But Juno Choi and then, see what you can find. Everything is happening indoor environment, right? So virtual reality fake environment, but still, we, the participants, users, we are exploring those stuff in physical indoor environment. So he was questioning, is it really we are providing ecologically right setting? So researchers claim IVE, mostly this time I'm going to talk about virtual reality, a representative one, have physical and psychological impacts on this kind of factors of human beings. So we want to explore. We are really providing ecologically correct setting. Then indoor environment part, which factor we should try. And we found that thermal quality is the most significant variable that affects human immersive satisfaction and work productivity. Among the four IQ components, thermal lighting is visual comfort and acoustic and air quality. So study goal again, we want to investigate whether this virtual reality, immersive virtual environment actually affects human sensation of environment, and also eventually it's going to affect humans' productivity and probably satisfaction. So this is the experiment setup. So two rooms, that's boring to some people and still exciting to some people. And the upper one is virtual reality view, and the down one is actual the indoor environment one. So just the participants were sitting in the desk and monitor and then chair. And the other one is what the users was looking at the environment through virtual reality goggle. So this was the procedure of this experiment. We did 16 participants for 90 minutes per condition, so they did 3 hours total. So for the first 30 minutes, the preparation room is the temperature was like 75, and then users were prepared there, and then they were moved to another room. It changed from 68 Fahrenheit to 86 Fahrenheit. And users were reporting the thermal sensation, and skin temperature was detected by sensors. So the upper one is thermal sensation subjective the questionnaire. So the 7 Likert scale on the users every 10 minutes they reported, and then the down one was sensors detected the users' skin temperature. So these results, as you can see, indoor environment, real environment, mostly skin temperature higher, and overall thermal sensation higher. This one was not significant though. So overall result is significantly higher skin temperature at whole body area, chest, back, and waist in indoor environment, real one. No significant difference for the thermal sensation. Interesting one was thermal sensation become less sensitive in virtual reality when the indoor temperature is relatively warm. and significant gender difference. Males have mostly higher skin temperature and greater thermal sensation in indoor environment, wear environment, but females want the opposite result we got. So there's no right conclusion here. This one is really first stage to get into explore this kind of subject. So conclusion, we found these small findings, IV influences human thermal perception and skin temperature in indoor environments. And we want to explore more vectors like this. And while I was creating this PPT, and I got this email from USC, and I thought it was interesting, I put this one here.